If you've come from a non-IB school, you've probably had school values or perhaps a pastoral curriculum. The learner profile can look like this. It isn't. It is a statement of what the IB believes education is for, a different type of person, someone open minded, curious, reflective, caring, someone who can engage with the complex world and contribute to it. And as a new IB teacher, what you probably don't realize is that the learner profile applies to the whole community. Yes, it applies to you as well. Open minded, principled, caring, risk taker. These are descriptors that they are not just meant for students, they are the professional standard that you agreed to when you accepted the post. Your students are already watching how you cope when you don't know something, how you react to views that you don't necessarily agree to, and whether you are really interested in their views or simply managing the classroom. The learner profile is already operating in your classroom. The only question is whether you are deliberately working with it. And this is where it gets interesting because once you understand who the learner profile is aimed at, everything about how you use it has to change. Every major stand of the IB philosophy, inquiry, reflection, student agency, they're all pointing towards the same outcome. The learner profile is where it all converges, which means that the learner profile is not just a layer that you add on top of your teaching. So take Thinker, for instance. You can write it as a lesson objective, you can include it on your PowerPoints or on your unit plans, and still you can design an activity that has nothing to do with thinking. That means that the label is there, but your thinking isn't. The difference isn't in the label, it is in the design decision that you make when you start planning. Your subject expertise tells you what good thinking looks like in your subject area. What the learner profile does is to ask you to make that explicit. Design it deliberately and name it when you give feedback to students. And that's a different type of planning from the one you probably arrived with. Make sure you watch the next part because that's where the practical trap lives. I want to name these directly because it's something I see quite often. The learner profile goes on the wall. It is in the scheme of work. You mention it in the first lesson of your unit, and then it never makes it into the feedback students receive, the tasks they are set, or any structured reflection. This is what I call the poster trap. For experienced teachers, this happens because the profile still feels like an add on, something running alongside the real work, which in your mind, it's still content and skills. But when students feel that teachers treat the learner profile as a formality, they do the same. It becomes school language, something that gets said, not something with real consequences for learning. The poster trap has a close relative and is worth naming: compliance language. This is when the learner profile appears in every document: curriculum, unit plan, lesson plans, assessment, but the decisions behind those documents haven't changed at all. The IB framework is thorough. It is easy to feel like ticking the right boxes counts as implementation. Well, it doesn't, and experienced examiners and coordinators will spot the gap. The earlier warning still applies here. The learner profile has to shape every decision and not just decorate it. And here's the thing: students don't develop the attributes of the learner profile just from hearing about them or because there's a display on the wall. The attributes emerge through learning experiences, through tasks that require thinking, questioning, collaborating, reflecting. So instead of asking, how can I teach the learner profile, try asking, what type of experiences am I creating that allow these attributes to develop in my students? That one question will change how you approach planning and feedback. And here's the principle underneath all of this: Your subject knowledge is not the ceiling in the IB classroom. The ceiling is your ability to develop that knowledge into learning experiences that develop the whole student. Teachers who use the learner profile well, they're not doing any extra work. Taking the expertise that they already have and learn to direct it through this framework deliberately and consistently. Three things to do this week. No new workload, just a different lens. Look at one of your next lessons. Find the learner profile attribute that is most relevant for your core task. Check the task structure and whether it really aligns with the attribute that you've chosen. Now, look at one piece of written feedback that you've given. Are you using the language of that attribute? For instance, oh, you've questioned the source really well. You've reconsidered your position when you found new evidence. That's the type of language that it's important to use. And finally, notice your own professional behavior through the lens of the learner profile. How do you respond when you're uncertain in front of students? That's the learner profile in action. So here's where we are. The learner profile applies to you and not just your students. It is the point where all IB philosophy strands meet, which means that it belongs inside your lesson design and not alongside it. Students develop these attributes through learning experiences and not just through displays. If you want to build that understanding with proper structure and support, the link below tells you how I can help. I am Carmen Millán, founder and director of Mestralia Education, and I'll see you in the next video.